But to bring it down to earth, my nickname for decades has been Dave Dirt, because I used to be a naturalist, and so the kids, and I have teachers, and even the superintendent secretary in Fairfield who still calls me Dirt, so. Okay.
Now it may be inferred to something else, but we won't go there.
You all have these traffic light cards. Does anybody does not have traffic light cards?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped it.
And our session today, the purpose of the session is we want to take you on a walk through the test specifications documents that Ohio has, ODE has produced for the science tests, which will be online this coming spring, and then talk about what the implications are for that, for how the kind of instruction and assessment you might do in the classroom, and how you might plan your calendar map, so that which topics come when. And this is, we want this to be really informal. This is for your needs. So at any time, throw up your hand, yell out, say, hey, I've got a question about this. Or, so we're going to find out, anything to add, Mary? We want to find out who you are. So if you teach 8th grade science, in fact, if you teach 8th grade science, raise your hand and say, that's me. Okay. 2 that's me, okay. High school physical science, that's me. Okay. Okay. High school biology.
That's me, that's me.
A number of you. Okay. If you teach something else besides those.
That's me.
That's
me.
If you're a principal. Okay. And where are you a principal?
Winton Woods.
Winton Woods, okay. If you're a curricular central office person. Okay. You've got Steve at Hamilton County ESC. Okay. And if you're part of the CEEMS team. Okay. That's us. Anybody we left out? Great. These are the content standards documents, and you've probably seen these before, the high school version and the K through 8 version on the right. So take out your red, yellow, green cards, your traffic light cards. We like to use these because it can give us a quick view of people's understandings, their comfort level with materials. So.
Now we have a question. He teaches math. Is there one of these going on for math teachers?
There's not.
Okay. Okay.
Will you allow me to stay?
You're welcome to stay, just don't throw tomatoes at us when it doesn't fit you. Okay, so the way these work is to take the color that best represents your understanding and use of the content standards, and you put that color on the bottom of the stack. So since I know them, I should know them pretty well, so I'm putting the green on the bottom. So put them on the bottom of the stack now, and once your stack is ready, then now just hold them up in front of you so that we can take a look around. As we're looking around the room, we see that there are some greens and a lot of yellows, okay? And this helps us out. We use these in classrooms a lot as well in the other teacher workshops, where every student has a set of these at the table, and so we can get a sense of their understanding or comfort level with material. So most of you have either read them or browsed them yet. Implementation. If you've implemented already last year those content standards, or green, implemented next year, yellow, not sure, doesn't apply, red. Go ahead, let's see what you got. We have a lot of people who have already implemented. In fact, most of you, it looks like, have implemented last year. Test specifications documents. The document that you have a piece of in front of you, and the reason you're here. If you spent some time with it already and you're pretty comfortable with it, green, browse through it a little bit, yellow, not yet examined, red. So we have the full range from green to red here. Okay, thank you. Quick history. You want to take over the quick history?
Sure.
There you go.
Okay, first of all, one thing that you hear all the time is park assessment, park assessment, park assessment. And everyone believes that park assessment means math, English language arts, science, and social studies, which is not true. It is only math and English language arts. The social studies and the science assessments are not Common Core standards, therefore they're not developed by Park. Instead, they are state standards, Ohio state standards, and Ohio had to hire a test company to produce the test for science and social studies. And the company that is doing the science and social studies test is called AIR, A-I-R. So it's not a Park assessment, it's an AIR assessment. But it was asked that they look similar or be as similar as possible because we have kids that are having to take both tests. So they want the format and as much as possible to be the same. But they are two different companies, so you know they're not going to be identical. 2011, we adopted the standards in the model curriculum. And we've had this time frame in order to transition into those standards. Some of you just finished OGTs and just finished OAAs, and that all pertain to the old standards. So some of you may be becoming more familiar on those new standards now than you have. Off test grades, you probably did start last year without any problem at all. In 2013-14, we had that transition fully implemented, which is why the testing starts this coming school year. So we're going to talk a little more about what those assessments look like. In science, they're going to be the 5th, the 8th, and the physical science test. And for graduation, about 3 weeks ago, they finally adopted the fact that it's the physical science end-of-year test that's going to be the high-stakes test for students who will be graduating. And then, of course, the 5th and the 8th grade test will be the high stakes for the district. And the big change for all of these is that they are no longer grade band assessments. So 5th grade is 5th grade content only, 8th grade is 8th grade content only, and then, of course, physical science is an end-of-year course test, end-of-course test.
Can I ask a question?
Now, just,
On the end of course exam for like 5th grade and 8th grade, that's going to show up on the local report card?
Yes, it will.
Is there going to be any publication of the performance-based assessments as well?
The performance-based and the end-of-year assessment are combined for the score.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the breakdown will look like that's sent to the schools. I'm sure you'll know one for the other. But as far as being released to the public, I'm not sure how that will be released. I'm not, have you ever asked that question?
no.
We're going to be in July, we'll find that out. Hopefully we'll be able to share that. But,
Another question to find out, you probably don't know the answer, is
Yeah.
I was wondering how value added will play into any of this switchover.
yes.
You might not know.
The purpose, one of the purposes of having the test only be grade specific is the anticipation of possibly putting it as value added at some point in time. But there has to be enough data points, so it's not going to happen next year for science or social studies. But is it a possibility down the road? It is. So, but we don't know that for sure. So.
Now, before Mary jumps into the 2 parts of the assessment, you notice that what was conspicuously missing from the list of assessments, 5th, 8th, and physical science, was biology. ODE has been planning all along to have a biology end-of-course exam, and the initial plan of the Department of Education was that there would be 2 high-stakes tests in science, one in biology and one in physical science. They've been preparing those tests. The tests are getting ready for prime time. And then when the legislature passed this bill 3 weeks ago, they left biology out.
It wasn't like it was forgotten. It chose not to make it an end-of-year or end-of-course assessment.
So,
That's high stakes.
right, so we don't know why. I think some people at ODE don't know why either. They were surprised as well. But and what we don't know is, since the biology tests have been are being developed and are almost done being developed already, if they will go ahead and make the biology tests available to schools, just not make them high stakes tests. I would personally like to see that so that we can get that kind of data. And the reason why we passed out biology test specifications documents to those of you who teach biology anyway is that it has some really good guidance on how to do the kind of rigorous instruction and focus of content that you can do in your class, whether or not you're taking a high-stakes test.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think it might be because physical science is normally, I don't know if this is true across state, physical science is usually taught in the 9th grade and they will continue a 10th grade test?
You know, we have a whole list of possibilities of the reason, and I think it's probably any combination of those. That's a possibility, it's a possibility. The one that I hope is the possibility that may or may not be true is that physical science is foundational. You know, the deep understanding of physical science is important to all sciences. And so they were thinking that way, that, okay, if we have to choose one, let's make it the one that makes sure that students have a foundation in physical science. It could have been, there may have been some political issues with the biology one. There's a whole list of things that could have made those decisions, but we really don't know. And neither does ODE. They are like, who knows?
Steve?
Just my 2 cents on that, just to add another possibility. Many school districts don't even teach a physical science class, especially for their top honor students, which typically go from bio right into chem as sophomores. So there's, I think,
But they picked physical science.
but
But they picked physical science.
I know,
Is
but
the-
I'm
and it's
thinking the reason
required.
being that they're gonna force people to have to make sure those kids have that, or they're gonna just wait till the ACT to show that they have.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and it is a required, the students have to take it.
Because
And
that's
it's-
when it came up,
and
the
of course.
questions that I was getting all the time, and,
Yeah.
listening to Kathy going, this district doesn't even have physical science.
That's
and
right.
They're mandated to do it, they're gonna have to cover it.
Yeah,
Now they have
and
to.
now, if you want your students, your higher end students to take it in 8th grade, what do they do there? Yeah, those are all questions that we just don't have answers for at the moment, because it happens so quickly.
Do they take 2 tests in 8th grade?
Yes.
8th grade in physical
Yeah, we don't
science?
have those
They just
rules
take
yet.
one?
My son was in an accelerated program and took 9th grade Algebra 1 as an 8th grader.
That's
He
correct.
earned high school credit as an 8th grader. Does
Right.
that mean that in addition to that, the 8th grade
It's
test, he
possible.
would also take the Algebra 1 end of course exam towards that high school credit, because it was towards
Right,
graduation requirements?
yes, if they're taking algebra, and those rules and regs for math have already been written, and they've been in place for a while, but for science, nothing like that has been existed.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But the problem is, currently, students must take physical science in order to graduate and pass that test. And in 8th grade, all students must take 8th grade science assessment. And when you start delving into what does 8th grade look like, content, and what does physical science content look like, it is significantly different now. In the old standards, it wasn't, and that was very doable to take both tests. But now, that's a big question. It's very, very different.
So life science.
So
and earth
even-
science, do it?
Yeah, it's very heavy earth science, and even students that, achieve very well, it may be a problem if they don't have any background on that, on the earth science piece. So we don't know. We don't know what those answers are. We're hoping that by the end of July, when we go to a meeting, they'll have some of that hashed out. So you're right.
But they're scrambling right now.
They are. They are really
As a result of the
scrambling.
legislation.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you. Okay, so all of the assessments are two-part assessment. And part one is what's known as the performance-based assessment, and sometimes referred to as the Heian scored assessment. So, and then the second part is the end of year for the 8th grade, 5th and 8th grade. It's called end of course for high school. It's called end of course for high school. So we already know in grades 5, 8, and physical science, this assessment will begin. When does it occur? Well, about 3/4 of the year in, 3/4 of the way into the school year is when we will have the performance-based assessment, which means somewhere between the end of February and the middle of March. They used to have specific dates on the website, but they've pulled those right now. So we're thinking they may readjust some of that timing, but we don't know. But we do still anticipate it being in that time frame, somewhere in that time frame. It's not like it's going away, they're gonna readjust the dates. About 7/8 of the way into the school year, or May, is when the end of year assessment's gonna occur, and that piece is machine scored. Eventually, this will not occur next year, but eventually, the reason for having the hand score done earlier and the machine score at the end is because at the end of the school year, when your kids are walking out the door, they will already have their results. They'll already have their results. The first year, that won't be true because the cut scores have to occur, and that happens over the summer. And so the first year, we won't get them immediately, but after that, when at the end of the year, the students will know and you will know how the students did before you leave school. They're no longer grade level, or they're no longer grade bands, they are specific. And of course, all three of them are high stakes to the school, and physical science is high stakes for the student. This is just a little view of what it looks like online. All three of these assessments are online assessments. Physical science, 8th grade and 5th grade for science is going to be an online assessment. These are available these are like some just examples. Now, don't get too hung up on the content that's being presented in these examples, but it's more the architecture of what it's going to look like when the students go online to see it. Because the examples just came from AIR, was something that they had in their database that they could use as an example, but they really wanted you to be able to see what students, doesn't work. Your pointer doesn't work.
Well, that's the point, it's pointed at the computer.
No.
No?
No, I meant the laser
Oh.
pointer. I don't know. It's not working. That's okay. But essentially, going across the top along the bar, there are certain things students will be able to do. His is connected, it's okay.
Okay.
They can zoom in to make a bigger font. If it's necessary, they can zoom it out. They can click on line reader, and so as they're reading a question, each row of the prompt will highlight so that it makes it easier for them to read. There's a place where they can keep some notes. If they want to keep some notes, the one disadvantage of the notes happens to be that you can't cut and paste them. But you can at least, if they need to write something down or remind themselves of something, they can do that. And in this particular case, this is one example of the type of machine-scored part. It's about 50% of the test is multiple choice. No matter which grade level, about 50% of the end-of-year test or the end-of-course test is still multiple choice. And it is still 4 choices. And it's still 4 choices on the multiple choice.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm coming from a district that had very little technology available, and so I know we were piloting the parks assessment this past spring, and I know in my classroom personally I had about 3 computers available for students, but I know a lot of the students that were taking the parks assessment on a daily basis for an entire week, we crashed the entire school computer systems, and we didn't find a way around it. Do they have plans in?
Yes, they do. They have plans. First of all, some of the schools are making those adjustments. Lots of times they were doing those tests, those stress tests, just to see if it was going to shut down. I happened to be at Oak Hills one day when they were doing their stress test, and at 2:30, every kid went online just to see what would happen. It wasn't pretty. Yes, one, your district's probably doing some things, but 2, all assessments also have a paper pencil assessment. But the district has to apply to do that, and it's not just an automatic, yes, okay, there will actually be an inspection and to determine if there really is a need. So it's not going to be an easy hoop to jump through, because they really want the majority of students to take an online assessment.
Now, are they doing any kind of data collection on their end to take
schools that can afford the technology to have students take it pencil and paper and compare a comparable school with kids who took it on a computer to see how much of that test score is actually the student's knowledge versus the student's ability to navigate the website versus the fact that kids look at computers as entertainment and not as a tool for education.
That's right. It's a big shift in their understanding of how we use computers, for sure, which is part of, I'm sure we will discuss what are some things you're going to do in your classroom to start helping students recognize that. The ODE does lots and lots of data, and I have no idea if that's one. I'm not really sure. It comes up a lot, and usually when it comes up a lot, that usually means that, yeah, they know that's something that they need to kind of keep an eye on, but I don't know for sure if they are going to take true data. I can tell you that when you do get your assessments back, it's going to be a struggle to determine whether or not it was being able to use the computer was a problem, or was it that the level of expectation on the assessment was the problem, or is it a combination? We're not going to know that for a while. But I've been involved with the performance assessment pilot for the last 6 years. And what we found, the first year is ugly. It's going to be ugly no matter what. First year is ugly. But then it does get better because the teachers start recognizing what's necessary. The students, believe it or not, they weren't really the problem. Even in the first year, they were pretty good at using the electronic system. It was much more the teacher issue than it was the student issue. And if you give them opportunities to practice and see these kind of formats, which you will be able to do, it will help. It will help a lot. So, okay.
And one problem that I think I'm curious to see how they deal with the paper and pencil version is that some of these tests, actually the students are manipulating the simulation online.
Like this.
And so do this, collect data here based on the data you get from the simulation, answer these questions. I don't know how they're going to.
I don't know how that's going to happen either, but there are paper pencils, so somehow they've come up with that. You're right. Yeah, we're not real sure. This is a perfect example. These are called stimulus response questions, and in this particular case, it's question number 4 and question number 5. So it's, we used to have cluster questions. Well, this is a new form of a cluster question. So they have to do number 4 first, where they're going to run a little test. What they're trying to find out is what is mineral X? And this is all the information of the different possible minerals that it could be in question number 5, and all the characteristics of those minerals right here. So they can pick all of these tests. Now in this case, they want to be able to do it in as few tests as possible. So that ups the ante. So that if they click on the acid test, and this is not a live shot, or would be able to show you how it works, the mineral would be there. It would have a little simulation. By the way, you may want to add that as a vocabulary word because students don't know what the word simulation means. Simulation will happen, and does a little acid test, and then it will present the results in a chart form below it. And when it presents those results in chart form, they see it in action. They have to come over to this chart and eliminate any of them based on the results of the test. So they click on them, and it makes a line go through. So it's they have to really they do have to know how to use the system, but they also have to learn how to take things away. Figure out, nope, that doesn't work, throw that one out, and look at the next test. So this is considered a technology-enhanced question. About 50% of the end-of-year assessments will be these kind of questions, this kind of setup. And sometimes it's a drag and drop, sometimes it's making a graph with points and lines, sometimes it's a arrows connecting, matching, various things, sometimes it's checking.
That font is in cursive. Kids don't know how to write or read cursive in this.
Yeah. Now, remember, don't panic over the exact question on this right here, because the reason I say that is these are just things they pulled to show examples. It's really getting the understanding of the architecture of what the assessment, how you push the buttons correctly. So don't worry about that. Okay. And even though it is in cursive, that's not truly cursive, but it's enough that they could probably
Half a
read
minute.
it. Yeah, it's sort of a half and half. It looks like a scientist wrote it. Okay,
It's too neat for a scientist.
Yeah.
that's true, you're right. Way too neat for a scientist. Another possibility, another thing that they can do is, this is the ones that are hand scored, where they're actually going to have to type in their answers. And so in this particular case, on the left side, it's a split screen. And on the left side, there will be possibly several different things they will have to look at. If we could scroll up and down, there was a reading prompt, there was this particular chart, and then down below was a diagram of the Earth, current Earth. And then they had to answer this question based on those and draw evidence based on those 3 documents that they're looking at. Now there are some tools. One thing, they can highlight in any of the reading text and keep it highlighted, so if they're looking for evidence, they can highlight it. And if we have any time at the end, we can actually show this live so you can see some of those things. The other tools that, well, the highlighting is really helpful, very, very helpful. And on the multiple choice, they can remove possibilities. They can do those type of things to narrow down their focus. They do have another bar where they can change some of the font. They can't change the font. They can make it bold, italicized, underline, subscripts. They have symbols, so if they have to show a formula or something like that. And there is word check, or spell check on it as well. Another thing that they have is the little flag. If they're not real sure, a student can't go forward on the assessment without putting an answer in. Doesn't have to be a right answer, but they do have to put an answer in. And so if they're really not sure and they want to remind themselves, I need to go back to this question, they can click on the flag, and at the end of the test, it will remind them of all the things that they flagged. And in either case, they can go back and look at them all if they want to, even if they didn't flag them. They still can go back and look at them. Yes?
Now, you know, one of the test taking strategies my kids have always used is like jotting down. I know it's got the little note thing, but are they allowed to have a piece of paper and a pencil if they wanted to make a little table for themselves?
Right.
Or
Those rules and regulations haven't come out yet. We haven't seen those yet. And that's what they're working on right now. In the pilot, it was allowed, but I don't know that it will be with high stakes because of the security issues, because who knows what that paper has on it. And I know there's a lot of trust issues. Same thing with, will you be able to talk to your students if they have a computer issue? Because if I'm standing over here and talking to her and explaining a computer issue and somebody walks by the door, it may look like I'm giving them the answer. So we don't know what those rules and regs are going to be, and it may be different for different grade levels. For example, high school, probably not allowed to do any of that.
I mean, OGT, they walk in empty-handed, they walk out
That's right.
empty-handed.
That's right, they do.
I mean,
So I don't know how they're going to set those rules up at this point in time, but it is good. That is a really good question. What's not showing up here, and I don't know why, but there is a menu bar, and on the menu bar it has the how to do something electronically if they can't figure out how to answer the question because they don't understand how to make the drag and drop and stuff. It always has a place where they can go to find out how to do that. And this eye does the same thing. If they click on the eye, it'll tell them how to manipulate the different buttons. Doesn't give them an answer, but it at least tells them that. So no, we don't know, but at the high school level, are you high school? High school level, I am not anticipating that they're going to have anything. They're going to be allowed to have anything.
it would be, if they had like a little brief tutorial before this test started.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
To run them through a drag and a drop and.
Absolutely. This is available right now. It's very brief. And at the beginning of the school year, there will be an actual practice test that will be released. And you will be able to use that as many times as you want to get them to understand how to use the technology itself. So,
With those navigation, that kind of navigation and
Yes.
everything.
yes, it is going to be basically, right now, they are just finishing up the range finding of the field test. How many of you did field test? Any of you in this room? One? For science or math, or social studies. Just one? Okay. Those field tests are being range bound right now, and then of course, oftentimes questions will get thrown out for various issues. And they'll take those questions that have been thrown out, put them together to be an example of a sample test. Now, sometimes they're thrown out for things that really wouldn't affect you at all, but at least it gives you a way of practicing with your students on, an actual assessment. And I can tell you that these are very basic. The samples that we're showing you right now are really basic. When we get that, the real one, you'll see it's, the technology's the same, but some of the questions are much higher level than what we're seeing in their
And
exams
when
here.
is that gonna get released?
Should be in the fall. Well, it will be in the fall. And I hope it's as early as possible, but I don't know. I know they will get it out as early as they possibly can, so.
Initially, I was telling teachers, well, the fall doesn't officially end until December 21st.
Yeah.
But
I think it'll be before then.
my prediction is sometime in September.
That's my guess too. So, but we're not right very often when it comes to ODE because no one is. But yeah, we hope so. So that's the third major type of questions, and these are the ones that are all hand scored. Even though they're students write them electronically, these are all hand scored. Okay. Any other questions? I did notice a couple buttons I should tell you. First of all, it says save up there, and it will save no matter what. It's up there just so you feel better about it. So there's, you can save it if you want to, but as soon as you hit the click next, it automatically saves. So that's not a problem. There is also a pause button. The pause button is if for some reason there's an individual student technology issue, if there's something written in a student's IEP, and it gives them a time where they're able to stand up, take a break, a 10-minute break or something like that, they click on that pause button. They have 20 minutes total in their testing time that they can take a break. But the minute 21 minutes, if they go over that 21 minutes, what happens is they're no longer allowed to go back into the test. So that's what that one is. Now, if there's a issue with technology that's more than just an individual student or one or two students, it's a classroom-wide or a building-wide, your testing and technology people have the hotline to inform ODE of that, and they would give them procedures on how to take care of that. That's not something that you need to be terribly concerned with. So, okay. Your turn? Or you want to?
Item types. We have two different categories of item types, the machine scored and the hand scored. And the machine scored, if you notice, multiple choice obviously can be scored by a computer. And the graphic response if they're dragging and dropping or drawing lines on a graph. The short answer also, some of the short answer questions where they're actually typing in a sentence for an answer, there are algorithms built into the system so that they can grade them by machine instead of those short answers needing to be graded by people, which is what was needed even with the short answer responses for the OAA and OGT. And I know that creates anxiety in some people, but from the studies that I've read, the computers are consistently better and more accurate at scoring than people are for some of those short answer ones. So that's all machine scored, and then the hand scored short constructive response and extended constructive response. Hand scored will only be on the performance assessment so that there's time for those answers to all get shipped off electronically to companies that then gather and train people to do the grading of those. And whereas the machine score can take place in either the performance assessment or the end of course assessment, because those results will be available instantly. And the test design, as Meri talked about, you have performance-based assessment in March and end of year assessment with part one, the performance-based, some hand scored, some machine scored, all machine scored for part two, given the time. The documents that you have you have a physical science and an 8th grade science test. And some of you have also had some biology. Examples that we have are mostly from 8th grade and physical science, since those are both tests are remaining at high stakes. If you notice, and we'll just walk you through the beginning, the first page of the grade 8 science document that you have talks about what we've already explained. 2-part summative performance and end of year, and it describes what each one is. And then on the back of page 2, you get to the blueprint, grade 8 summative exam blueprint, and table 1. So the table 1 that you have for 8th grade on the back is this table 1 right here. Notice this tells you how many points will be available, for how many points each of these parts will count. You notice the performance-based in March will count for 26 points less than the end of course, which will count for 20 points and then 36 points, for a total of 56 points for the whole assessment. Notice there are no multiple choice in March, and there are no hand scored at the end of the year. This just tells you a range of points. There will be between 8 and 12 points assigned to questions for the performance-based and the 2 parts of the performance-based, and down at the end of the year about how many for multiple choice versus graphic response. Questions here?
And I will say that, I know you see the numbers and you are math and science people, but the performance base is worth about 35% of the student's overall score. And the end of year is worth about 65% of the student's overall score. Those are combined to get their overall score. 35% is significantly higher than what we're used to with our 2-point and 4-point extended response questions. So that's a big shift in the expectations for students right there.
And the distribution of categories, so I can turn to table 2 now in your 8th grade document. And all this says,
Or high school, they're the same.
yeah, just the same, so the high school distribution is the same. This just shows you that, like, what percentage of the questions will be in each of those domain areas. And for 8th grade, the fact that you have more earth science than you have life science and physical science total points is that there are more content statements for earth science than there are for life or physical. So the ratio of points for each domain, each category, is directly related to how many content statements there are for that category. And then table 3. In table 3, since, unlike the OGT, which said, okay, you're giving it in March, but we're testing you on the full year of content, so you were scrambling to get that content covered. For the performance-based test, ODE is telling you up front, this is the content that we will test in March. And the content that you don't see in that list, we won't test until May. So in particular in earth science, you notice we have 4 content statements in earth science, only 1 in life science and 1 in physical science for 8th grade. So the missing life science and physical science content statements will be tested in May, but not in March. Now, all of these can still be tested again in May, but when you're planning your calendar, you can plan, and one thought is, I need to make sure I cover this stuff by March. The stuff that's not on here, I might put till after March. And in physical science, similarly, in physical science we don't have content statements, we have topics and then subtopics. So this shows that the topics in matter, energy, waves, force, and motion, and that the universe is not assessed on the performance assessment. And what these tables don't show you is the missing content statements. And so what Meri and I have both done with a couple of different documents is create documents that show you, put the missing ones and the covered ones on the same page.
Yeah, so the ones that say physical science hand-scored items on one page and the 8th grade on the other page, the papers that we gave to you.
So for example, talking about 8th grade, the earth science, there are 4 content statements in earth science, they're all testable in March. In life science, however, there are 3 content statements in life science, and only 2 of them are testable. So those, the bold-faced one is testable in March, the 2 italicized content statements aren't testable until May. And again, with physical science, there are 3 physical science content statements in 8th grade, only 1 is testable in March, the one in the middle. And then here it is all on one page, where you have all the earth science, bold-faced, life science, and the physical science, showing what's testable and what's not.
So how that is on your sheet that you're looking at is up at the top in the table are all the things that David was showing. So on 8th grade, earth science, the ones with red check marks means it's performance-based. It would be under performance-based assessment. And under physical science, the ones with red check marks would be still game for the performance assessment, but the one written below it is not. And same thing for the life science.
And this document that Meri has created has some additional information on it.
It does.
When we get to that.
Yes.
Okay. So 8th grade 8 topics for the March performance-based assessment with hand-scored examples. So this is kind of small, but it's a collection of, for earth science, for example, these are all the kinds of tasks that students might have on the performance-based assessment. It's one thing to say it's going to be kind of like a glorified extended response question for the OA or GT, but it's really not. For example, in the first one it says, given data, developing and justifying conclusions about the formation of Earth and or Earth's interior. So the students are going to have data and have to develop, make a conclusion and justify it with the evidence. Evaluating the composition and cross-sections data of Earth and other planets to make and justify conclusions about the formation and history of each planet. So, and then using evidence to support and justify conclusions, using data from diagrams to explain and justify a conclusion about the movement of plate boundaries, etc.
So while David's talking about that a little bit, how many of you are 8th grade again? A couple of you? So if you look through here, there are 12 different bullets. And if you take a look at how many of them ask students to justify an answer by providing evidence, or explain an answer for providing evidence. Take a look. How many of the bullets require students to be able to do that? Almost all of them. It is 11 out of 12 bullets are asking students to explain or justify an answer based on evidence. And that's a big shift from what they've always asked to do on assessments. Now, you may have been doing that in your classroom, but it's really important to start doing that very much more explicitly and practicing this on a regular basis, because believe me, on the performance assessment pilots, students didn't get that part. And so it's really important to start practicing that in the 8th grade. Now, if you look at physical science, it's not far from that. In additional, go ahead and take a look at the physical science. And in this case, we have 14 bullets. So how many of those 14 bullets ask students to provide evidence to justify or have some sort of rebuttal? Not quite as many. There is some, but the big focus in this particular case is those designing, planning and investigation, or planning and designing an engineering solution or product. So you're in a perfect system, perfect class right now, this year and next year, to help support that in the physical science piece. Okay?
And here we have some examples for 8th grade, some other examples. Life science, using evidence from a data-rich scenario to formulate and justify conclusions about how genetic variation affect the survival or extinction of a species when environmental conditions change, or evaluating data from fossil records to make and justify a conclusion about environmental changes, designing an experiment to test the effect of multiple forces on the motion of an object. So I see some things popping up a lot. One is, nowhere in here does it say, make a claim and provide evidence and reasoning. However, that's what they're doing, is they're basically making a claim and providing evidence and reasoning for that claim, for that claim. So if students are practicing whatever vocabulary you use, supporting claims with evidence and reasoning throughout science, from kindergarten on up, they can be making a claim and providing evidence for it, then they're going to be prepared for answering these kinds of questions. Another type is the designing an experiment. Design an experiment or design an investigation. And even though it doesn't say it explicitly here, I would want to make sure that my students knew that they were controlling variables, and what variables were being controlled, and what variable was being manipulated to be tested. And as they wrote their descriptions, they were explicit in identifying that it was obvious that this was a valid, controlled experiment they were creating.
That's what they're looking for. They're looking to see if students can write an experiment with one thing, one variable that's being tested, all others being as constant as possible. They're looking to see, do students use protocol that's appropriate? In other words, at least 3 trials for what they're doing. Can they make a chart that has a heading and has appropriate labels, and that they always use units when anything that deals with measurement? Those are the types of things that they're looking for in a student's planned investigation.
So those particular pieces, controlling variables, manipulating one, multiple trials to increase the validity, identifying the units, those stress. In physical science, unlike 5th and 8th grade, as you're aware, physical science doesn't have content statements. It has topics and then subtopics. And so in physical science, there are 4 general topics, each with subtopics. This shows you that, and it's a little hard to see, but the bold-faced topics are the topics that are potentially available for questions on the performance-based in March. The italicized one, not till Meri. And so it's not as simple as all of matter in March and then energy saved till May. You see, you have part of matter, but not bonding and reactions. You have part of energy and waves, but not the waves and thermal energy part. All force and motion, no universe questions till May. And in biology, if we actually have that biology test in the spring, the way the biology document was set up is that all of evolution, diversity, independence of life, 1 out of 2 topics, and no cells until then. Question distribution in physical science. So what, and I'm trying to think of the, oh, I know. The purpose for kind of revisiting this here is, if you notice here, on this document, on this graphic, it tells you how many points total will be represented by each topic. A little bit less in the universe because there aren't as many subtopics in the universe. But, so matter, energy and waves, and force and motion all have fairly similar amounts of points assigned for the whole test from March and the end of the year.
Now, do they or will they have all of this data available online for teachers that'll be administering these tests? Because like, this is
sheet that we're
extremely.
giving to you. This, I just collapsed everything and put it on 2 pages for you. But this document, absolutely, it's already online, available.
Through OBE.
Mhm. We'll show you where it is.
Because this is extremely valuable, but
It is.
I would have never known where or if to look for it.
Yes. That's why you came to this.
And so if you notice, matter, energy, waves, force, and motion, equal distribution of content. However, when I come back here, force and motion and matter have an equal distribution of content, but all of force and motion might be assessed in March, and only part of matter would be assessed. And in particular, classification matter, atoms, and periodic trends. All of this content is accessible in May as well. However, if I were going to gamble, I would say that there are probably going to be more questions on these topics here, the italicized topics, waves and thermal energy, and the universe, because we didn't get a chance to use up any of those points in March. So we're going to have a larger balance of them in May in order for.
So is the recommendation then, like when you're tackling one of these topics, that you hold the ones and teach them later, even though it makes sense to teach it as one unit at the same time?
It depends on the subject area. For example, in 8th grade, there are some things that you would probably be smart to break up. In physical
When
science,
looking at energy and waves,
Right.
why wait to teach waves and thermal energy after it doesn't
Other than
make
timing.
sense to me.
other than timing, because remember, all the ones in the bowl
Mhm.
you need to be ready by
I mean,
mid-February.
obviously, you're gonna teach the universe last,
Yes,
Right?
obviously.
but to me, it makes me crazy that you're gonna teach classification matter, atoms, and the periodic trends of the elements, but you're gonna hold off on bonding and reactions of matter until later. That just, I mean, it's almost like an attempt to like pull away some of that autonomy. Like, here's what you need to teach, do your thing. And now it's basically like, okay, teach this part of it then, but wait and teach that part later. It's a little bit frustrating.
Nobody's telling anyone to do those things. I'm just telling you that your timing really depends. And I'm not being facetious about that, because there are some schools that have longer class periods than other schools. So that makes a huge difference. If you have a 45-minute class, that
Right.
may not be possible.
Well, no, it absolutely is.
But if you
influence
have
your
a
pacing.
70-minute class, which many do, it very well could be possible. So that's why I'm saying that, yeah, it is going to determine your pacing and the way you are, but the answer is gonna be different for different schools.
And what you might do, the OEE, even when they give you this document, they say in the document somewhere, the Department of Education does not recommend a specific order of content. However, they're telling you what they're gonna test when.
They're gonna let you know at least, so that you're aware of those things, yes.
Do they provide any kind of reasoning of why they're testing it in this format? Is it simply because the topics that are italicized that will be on the topics that they chose to be on the performance-based assessment are easier to administer in that way? Is that why they're waiting?
That's one of the reasons, and I would tell you it wasn't an ODE decision. They actually had a panel, or not just a panel, they had a group of teachers across the state that gave them input. And they were able to say and provide a lot of input, and believe me, they actually listened to a lot of what the teachers had to say about it. But part of it is, does it lend itself to hand-scored type of plan and investigation, provide evidence? That was part of the criteria, there's no question about that. But
And so you might, for example, and just off the top of my head, begin the year with force of motion, and then move to matter and cover all of matter, and then mention the connection between, get into the connection between periodic trends and bonding and reactions, because the periodic trends relate directly to bonding and reactions, but not hit that deeply. Come on to energy and waves, and get to a certain, like partway through the energy and waves unit maybe, then the test comes, then you finish your energy and waves unit, go back and fill in more with matter and the universe. There are different ways of thoughts about how you approach it. And when I taught physical science before the test came along, we started with the chemistry to provide a foundation with the chemistry, and then did the force of motion, and then we're able to bring all of that together with the universe, which you still will be able to if you do the universe at the end.
when I go back to 8th grade, we can say the same thing, similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have
Yes.
all open space,
Yeah, all-
these are italics, and this is italics.
Right.
These are,
And so if I were teaching 8th grade, I would go with, starting with forces in motion, because then you can reinforce that as you move up into space science, because it's all about plate tectonics, the movement of the earth, so that forces and motions can be reinforced. Do all my earth science next, and then fortunately the life science piece really connects very well with the earth science, because it's all about the fossils and changes over time, so it can be built right into the earth science. Students don't even have to know it's life science. I mean, it can just be a part of, and I would make the earth and space probably two units, not one, but that's the majority of my timing for that one. And then I would go back and do the genetics and heredity after the performance phase, so. And fill in, and fill in, the potential genetic, and that just gives a nice review as well too, getting ready for the end of the year. So.
So now, there's guidance about the particular content in each topic for both a physical and biology. So we're going to go through, in your sample document, you have a section labeled content limits, and then do not assess stimulus attributes, these different categories. And for some reason, and I'm not sure why, Meri might know, the distractors come here, but I rearranged them because this all talks about, like the content limit speaks about, this is what, basically, what do we mean by this content statement? This is kind of what we mean. The do not assess says, but don't go this far, either because we covered this in an earlier grade and we don't want to assess it here in this grade, or it's not, if it's 8th grade, maybe this isn't a topic that we cover till high school, or if it's physical science, this isn't a topic that we cover till physics.
The distractors were up higher because the distractors are found on the machine score.
Okay.
That's why.
Oh, I see, because they're specifically which multiple choice
Yes.
answer was given. So they were related directly to that. And then, so we'll talk about what each of these pieces refers to with some examples. So in your 8th grade document now, if you turn to, okay. So on page 7 in the 8th grade document, content limits. These are samples, and first of all, in your sample, before you get to the content limits page, you see there's earth and space science, topic physical science, and the content statement. The content statement and the content elaboration are cut and pasted directly from the standards, the content standards. So you've seen this before if you're familiar with the content standards, word for word. Then that's for one content statement in earth science. Then when you turn to page 8 or page 7, you'll see content limits. This is what I love because it gives you more specificity. I've just given you the first 3 from your list here, but you see the whole list for that content statement. So they may be tested on matter and energy, thermal, radioactive, and seismic, that are transferred through the interior of the Earth. Behavior and properties of seismic waves, the mechanism and techniques to indirectly study the composition of the Earth's interior. Since we can't drill a hole to the core, what indirect methods do we use to make inferences about it? They won't be assessing on the definitions and characteristics of P versus S waves. So this is an important piece of information to know because a lot of earth science studies, we're doing earthquakes, and you talk about the different kinds of waves and their characteristics. You may still talk about those if you wish, but those are not going to be on the test. And then physical properties not directly, so this isn't about properties of waves, it's about what properties of waves are used to help us make inferences about the Earth's interior. And more generally about the formation of the solar system, like the nebular hypothesis for the formation of the solar system. Stimulus attributes. I really like this piece because this means they may have a question where one of the stimuli that they have is a diagram of the Earth's interior. And they have to answer some questions about it, or maybe label some parts, or draw, maybe graphs, cross-sections of the Earth, or other planets. Notice that. Graphs of temperatures versus depth, diagram with pictures showing energy. So what this tells me is that if I'm an 8th grade science teacher, I'm going to make darn sure that my students are answering questions using a diagram of the Earth's interior. I'm going to make sure that I give them graphs and tables of temperatures versus depth and ask them some questions about that. And diagrams showing energy transfer within the Earth. So since they're going to be seeing quite stimuli just like this on the test, I'm going to have them practice with those kinds of stimuli. And then the machine scored. And these are the kinds of performances that they'll need to do. Completing or interpreting diagram showing interpreting seismic wave data, given data or diagrams drawing conclusions about the formation of the Earth, with some examples of the rapid decay differentiation. And then for the hand scored, given data, develop and justify conclusions about the formation of the Earth and or the Earth's interior. Okay, so make a claim, I'm going to rephrase this, make a claim about the formation of the Earth and justify that claim using data, using evidence and reasoning. And these distractors, and I see what Mary's saying now, these distractors may be distractors for the machine scored questions. There's a multiple choice question. There might be an answer. These might be some of the answers that they receive. So, any questions? We went through the 8th grade examples on this. Yes,
Do you have any handouts with the 8th grade Earth, Space, and Science and Life Science content limits?
We don't have handouts for those because we didn't want to print out all 35 pages. But
Yeah.
we can tell you exactly where to find them online.
Yeah, we'll show you online how to find it. And I will tell you that each of these documents, you just have a little snippet of the whole document. The 8th grade is 36 pages, the physical science is 42 pages, I think. I mean, so that's why we didn't print the book for you. It is online, and you can take a look at it afterwards. We'll show you where it is, though. So.
What you've seen is, for example, there are 10, I believe, content statements in 8th grade, and we showed you all the pieces for the first content statement. And there are, the other content statements are set up exactly the same with those kinds of pieces. Let's take a look at the physical science one, because it's a little bit different now. Let's see. Okay, great. So physical science samples, let's see. Okay. So the kinds of responses that they may be expected to create, supporting with evidence whether particle particular regions of a heating cooling graph involve kinetic or potential energy. I'm going to make sure that they see and work with heating and cooling graphs and connect that to kinetic and potential energy, etc. Down here, content limits. So if you look, if you notice in the physical science section, I'm looking first on page 8, which is the matter section of physical science. Page 8, this comes straight from the content standards, the subtopics, and then the content elaboration for matter. It talks about classification of matter, atoms, all those subtopics there, straight from the content standards. Now when I get to the bottom of page 11 in your document, that's where the content limits begin. And those are just the first two, and the content limits continue for matter on the next page. And you'll see, for example, qualitative understanding of solutions. Example, concentration, solubility, solutes. What this tells me is they're not going to have to do calculations involving solubility, concentration, solutes, etc. This is qualitative understanding. Kinetic and potential energy relating to temperature, phase changes, etc. Density as it relates to phase and temperature changes, etc. But under the do not assess, so you're not going to be expected to do calculations involving thermal energy, look at solubility curves, etc. You can see all of this. Pressure and phase diagrams. When you get into physics and chemistry, chemistry in particular, You can have a phase diagram that also involves pressure, so it can become a three-dimensional phase diagram. That's not taking place here.
Can we have a comment about do not assess? Sometimes, not necessarily on this particular example, but on the do not assess, doesn't mean that you won't necessarily do it in your own classroom, especially if it's something that may have been required from prior knowledge and has been tested at a lower grade level, but you want to make sure your students are at a point before you begin the next part. So maybe in a formative assessment, you find out that they don't have an understanding to get to this point. So you may be doing some of it, it's just not going to be on the state assessment. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Sure, and most of the do not assess is because this is content that may be higher level or in a course, a subsequent course, but in some cases, as Meri was saying, it might be, this is stuff, like in 8th grade, for example, there's a do not assess because it was in 6th grade, and but they do expect that as foundational knowledge.
Right. And in the biology, there are a lot of things on cells that say do not assess, which I realize they're not actually going to do this test any longer anyways, but it was because it was being assessed at the lower grade level. So it is both high and low.
And then you can see stimulus attributes again, so table showing data about various properties of a substance, and then having to answer questions and use that data to make inferences. Drawing, picture, or illustration showing particles in solution and the various, so there may be a picture showing particles, dissolved particles, for example, in solution with some questions. Graphs with temperature versus time dated phase change. That shows up a lot. I'm going to make sure that my students know how to work with phase change. It's easy to ask lots of questions about phase change diagrams. Response attributes machine score. So I'm on page 14 now. As you can see, visually representing particles in solution, design a strategy or process to separate mixtures based on certain physical properties. And again, given melting and boiling point data, graphing temperature versus time through phase changes, there it is again. And hand scored response attributes, so you can see some of the tasks that they'll be asked to perform on the,
Which is on that list that you have already.
and then distractors for machine score, where we have particle size and temperature change during the phase changes. In other words, if the particles actually change size, or so you can see some of the distractors here. You have all of them listed. Sure.
So Dave has shown you the basic breakdown of each one of those. When you look at a content statement or when you look at the syllabi for the high school, every one of those areas has the stock information in it. So we'd like to show you real quickly where you can find this, and so you can look at the whole document. And then we'll also take you and show you where you can see those practice, the format assessments, before we talk a little bit more about what implications this has for you. And I will just tell you that the new assessments do not do well with Internet Explorer. Are we online here? We are. Okay. Oh, that's right. This is busy. Yeah. Okay. So it's education.ohio.gov. And those of you that are online, give me a little nod or a hands up if you're at that point, if you're doing this. Okay. There are plenty of ways to get to the documents that we've talked about, but I can tell you the easiest one. The easiest way is just go to the search and actually type in test specifications. when you get to this page where it says test specifications, I will tell you right now, it's the second link. Normally they try to keep this link at the top, but every so often somebody puts something on their website and doesn't readjust it. Somebody has to send them a note and say, hey, readjust your website again. So obviously they need to do that right now. But the one that says state developed assessment, science and social studies, click on that one. This is the page that has everything that we've shown you essentially. You notice they don't have the new assessment, the timeline, they pulled that part. They had very specific dates and they pulled it. I'm hoping, they got a lot of feedback from the schools that did the field test and said they need that timeline to be wider. So I'm hoping they're readjusting to make the timeline, the amount of time to be able to do it a bigger window. The test specifications, here you go. You can open up the 8th grade physical science or the biology, any one of those, but those are the big full complete documents for you that you were asking for.
And if you're an administrator and work with social studies or the colleagues who work with
Absolutely.
social studies, those are there as well.
That's right, because remember, social studies was produced by AIR as well, and it's a state assessment, not a park assessment.
What does AIR stand for?
I know the first word's assessment, but I don't remember the rest of it.
American Institute for
Oh,
Research.
it's not assessment. American, you're right. American Institute for Research is what it stands for. If you scroll back up to the top, just above where it says proposed timeline, there's a portal which shows you what the field test practice area is. And if you click on that, we'll take a look at this. You have 4 little boxes up here, student, teacher, test. You actually want to click on the one that says students and families. And I'm going to follow the rules that my husband follows, and that is he never follows directions. He just goes right into it. So we're going to look at the one that says student training site. And just click OK on the browser thing that you get that pops up. There is no need for a password or anything like that. Just click sign in. If I'm going too slow, yell at me, and or if I'm going too fast, yell at me.
So your name is now guest.
And so yes, your name is now guest, but on this particular page, you actually have to pick a particular grade level. When you have this drop-down box, I'll just tell you that 4th and 5th grade are identical, so it doesn't matter which one you pick, you're going to get the same examples. 6th, 7th, and 8th are identical, so no matter what grade level, you're going to see the same answers, or same questions. And then of course, 9th and 10th, same thing. They're going to be the same. And what they are is a combination of both social studies and science examples. So, because remember, they produce both assessments. So let's take a look at 8th grade first, and then we'll look at the 9th grade is their physical science. So click on 8th grade and click yes. It asks you about 1,000,000 times if you're really sure you want to start this test, and it asks you about 1,000,000 times if you're really sure you want to end the test. This is exactly what students will see. So this is all things you can be practicing with your students. So we're going to start the middle school training. And this next page where it says choose settings. If you have students that struggle with different backgrounds and things, those can be changed. Eventually, as they are written into their IEPs, and because these assessments will be connected to their EMIS number, it'll automatically be changed for them. I'm not anticipating that happening this year, but eventually that's the direction that they're going to go. I'm going to leave it on black and white and click select. And again, am I sure I want to start this test? Which of course I am. And then it's going to give you this place where it has directions. And this comes up when the students are taking the assessment as well. So if they want to go through the directions again before they start the test, they can. I'm going to hit begin test now. And the first example is the one that I showed you as a screenshot. And so we can zoom in and we can zoom back out. We can click on, and this is something you need to practice with your students. When in this system, when you're clicking something, you're turning it on, and it's going to stay on until you click off of it. So if I click line reader, it's going to continue that way until I no longer want to do that. Okay? I'm going to unclick it. On multiple choice ones, if you right click, it gives you the opportunity to strike out questions that you don't think would be anywhere close to the answer. So if you practice with students eliminating responses, they still can do that on the assessment. They still can actually do that on the assessment.
Yeah, so if a kid's on an Apple computer, which only has a single,
Yeah,
But,
there's actually, it's not, I don't know why it's not showing on the screen, but to the left here is the menu bar, and it has all of those options, and it does show up on the Apple screen.
no,
So, it what?
Use 2 fingers to hold it up.
And if you use 2 fingers, it clicks? Oh, I didn't know that one. She just said. So, and on an Apple, so, good. Again, they can pause, and they can't move forward. If you click on move up next, it won't let you go until you put an answer in. Doesn't have to be a right answer, but they do have to put an answer in of some sort. And I'm not reading these, so don't be grading me. Here you can flag it, and it makes a little check mark there. And if for some reason I didn't know how to answer a multiple choice question, it would show me how to do that. I can ask how to do that. All right. So the next question is that technology enhanced type question. Here we have a reading they have to read. This is, and then they have a chart they have to take a look at, and it has a key. And then they also have another more of a diagram type chart that they have to look at before they respond to the question. And they can use evidence from any one of those in order to respond to the question. So teaching them how to scroll up and down on a split screen is something that you would be practicing. If you want to see that whole diagram completely, you can click this arrow and it'll open up to the full screen for you. If you want to highlight because you're wanting to collect evidence, remember how you left click and then right click and it'll highlight for you. It does not allow you to cut and paste, so they can't just pick that information up and put it into their written document, but at least it's highlighted so they know what to write as when they're citing any type of evidence. I have not found on this that you can highlight anything on any of their diagrams or charts. It's only on the reading prompts that you can do that. You can bold, you can highlight, we've talked about all these, number, bullet, go back or change something, return back to what it was. If you want to fix it, you have the spell check, and then you also have all of your special characters and symbols. And even on the extended or these types of written responses, you still have to put something in order to go forward. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't care what you put in. And so, even if they just put a bunch of X's, they still can go forward. Here's another example. This is much more of a short answer response. Same exact tools that they have, just they aren't expected to be writing as much in this particular one. And then this was the example that I was talking about, where it's 2 questions on a split screen. They have to do the activity for number 4, and they have to answer, the answer for the activity is number 5. And so on this case, what the question is, they're looking for what is mineral X. And you're to figure it out by as few tests as possible. So we're going to do the acid test. And there's a place where it says start. And it has the little simulation. that occurs. And then it also starts this little chart on the bottom. And then if they want to do, let's do the scratch test. Oh, and on this one here, with the acid test, then they would go over to question number 5, and they'd say, okay, our mineral X did form bubbles, so any place where it did not form bubbles, I'm going to cross those off. So now I've got it narrowed down to 2 possibilities. And so now I'm going to find out with the scratch test if it's one or the other. And we're going to do the scratch test. This is a helpful hint. Did I just not, oh wait. And it tells me, did I just hit the wrong one?
No, it's
Sorry.
fine.
Oh yeah, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted the street test. And it looks white, but the chart tells me it's clear or gray. So then I can come back over here and say, it's this one, and so I eliminate this. And that's my answer. So they have to do the activity, and then they have to put their answer on the next, on the other side. This is a very common one. Okay? Even though this is a social studies example, it is another, it's a drag and drop. And so those are the ones the students are more used to than anything. And then they can go on.
Did they tell you the correct answer?
They do not tell you the correct answer. It's a test. And so they don't tell you the correct answer.
Even when it's done.
No, they don't. They don't. Now, and when they release the practice assessment, I'm sure they're going to give some sort of key for the teacher, or their answers may go directly to the teacher or something to that effect, but of course the students would not get that. It would be without the teacher doing it.
Mary, can we go back for a moment?
Sure can.
How did you scratch out the ones you didn't?
I just clicked them.
Oh, okay, because I actually tried to click on mouse, okay.
Yeah.
See, even me, I mean.
That's exactly right.
I
That's
see my mouse
the
and
reason.
went across it and, okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the reason this is critical for having students practice this before they go into a real assessment. So,
So the click toggles the strike through on and off.
yes, it does. And by the way, they can redo by the testing by hitting the trash can, and it'll delete it, and then they can try it again. So, okay. So the last one, this is another one. Remember I told you that you have to turn something on in order for it to work, which is totally against what we're used to. So if I want to make a line graph, I have to start with the points. I have to put my points in, and as long as it's on, I can put points in. And then if I want to connect the lines, I have to turn the line connector on. And in that case, I'm going to connect them. Like that. Okay? Oh, yeah, because it's carrying it through. If I don't like it, I have to turn delete on. And so then the delete will stay on as long as I have it turned on. And I shouldn't have deleted all of them, because now I have to put something in order to go forward.
Well, that there looks like,
Are we supposed to be graphing something specific?
You are. You're supposed to be reading the actual directions.
Gotcha.
Yes. Here they're asking, use the connect line button to graph a single line that represents a relationship between the amount of negative charge on the sphere and the elastic potential stored energy in the spring. So yes, they were supposed to be graphing.
I didn't know if it was like,
something
we create a graph and they like give us something back or not. So.
They do not. You don't get any response back from them at all. It's an assessment, so students are to do what they think is the right answer. And, or like me, just show you how to actually do it. So, and I don't know if it'll let me go through here with just 2 dots or not, but we'll give it a try. You've answered all the questions, no, I have. So,
Before you leave from this, I
yes.
noticed when you were connecting the dots and it eliminated one dot, so it looks like there's some techniques that the students really need to have practiced so that they know how to fill in a graph, complete a graph successfully without messing it up. Because they don't know the technique.
Yeah, absolutely. They would definitely have to practice that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it's going to ask you 100 times if you want to get out of this test. And so then it comes up with end test. And yes, I'm really sure I want to end this test. And then it comes up with a sheet that says, hey, by the way, you flagged something. Are you sure? Do you want to end or do you want to go back and check those flags? The word marked are the ones that you flagged, but it still gives you the opportunity to look at any one of the other ones as well. So.
You know, 4 and 5 were on the same screen, so.
Yes, they were. So it shows you that all the ones that are on the same screen. That's a good point. Or I could just click on review my answers and it would go all the way back to number 1. Or we can click submit test. And yes, again, I am sure. And then I can finally log out. So you can look at the same or similar examples with physical science. And in this case, you just click on the 9th grade. And it has some things that are a little higher level, but they, all of this is fair game. My suggestion is you practice, I was an 8th grade teacher, I'd be practicing the 5th grade, the 8th grade, and the physical science, and I'd probably be doing the same thing for all my students, because who knows what, there's some little differences in each one of them. So again, this is another one of these plan your investigation type thing where they have to do something here in order to respond to a multiple choice question. So they are going to, it's a genetics question, so how do we come up with a certain kind of fish? What color fish do we need? Anyways, but so we're going to decide that the round blue, and I'm just putting in an answer, so trust me. I'm going to set it up, and it's going to give me the genetic results of Punnett squares. And then I'm going to do another one. And I can continue to do multiple different tests. And then once I have my information over here, then I'm going to respond here. On this particular one, you'll notice there's a lot more things up at the top on the menu bar. They have a calculator at high school level. They have formulas at the high school level. And they also have a periodic table at the high school level. And those would be accessible at any time during the test. So.
Can you click on the periodic table?
Mm-hmm.
You can see the kind of detail that you would get on the periodic
Right.
table.
Absolutely. And if you want to see the formulas, types of formulas that would be available. Which is always good to know, that students don't have to memorize those things. And, there's lots of different types of calculators, so even practicing how to use this particular calculator will be helpful. So
this is the only calculator they
it is, it will be the only calculator that they're allowed to use. Here's another one, it's more of a checkbox, and doesn't matter what you check, it's still going to, you can do anything, but you do have to at least put some checks in the box in order to answer the question. Same thing with more drag and drop. No, if it makes you do them all, let's see. Nope, you can go forward, even if they just put one in, they can still go forward.
Excuse me, can you go back to that one?
I can.
So if the question is, which of these were responses to the use of the atomic bomb, you wouldn't want to drag, in fact, there isn't room to drag all of them in there.
No, actually, that's one of the things. On drag and drop in the higher grade levels, absolutely, there will be more possibilities than possible. So it just increases that rigor again.
So are they kind of verifying you that there are for sure 4 answers?
There, not necessarily, but I would say yes.
In fact, it says, yes.
So I think it asks for them to do 4. Does it not? Nope, it doesn't.
That's why I was like, is that?
I would say yes, but I won't guarantee that. I don't really know. So it seems like it would be. But I won't guarantee that. Here's another one. It's connecting the points and lines for a matching. This is the killer on this one. I don't want students to know this. All right, so you put your lines in. Those lines can go anywhere. And so, you know, I can just see certain students just exactly what they're going to do. But yes, and again, it doesn't matter what kind of answer they have, it's still going to go forward. But it's the same thing, you've got to turn something on in order to be able to do it. And that's pretty much it. So this is a very short and sweet little practice just to get used to the system. That's the whole purpose. Don't get bogged down on the questions. The questions were just pulled out so that you could see what it looks like. Okay? All right. So we're going to do a little bit on implications.
Sure. Go back to the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just, you can start talking.
Okay, so one of the nice things about the test specifications document is that unlike the content standards, there are certain, the guide gives us guidance, and we can use the guidance in those documents to make certain decisions about our calendar and the kinds of experiences we plan for our students. So for example, we talked about building your curriculum map for the year, that ODE does not say this is the order in which you must teach topics. However, it behooves you, for example, to wait till the end of the year to teach the universe unit in physical science, since it's a separate topic and it's not under performance-based assessment. Designing questions and performance tasks. So if those stimuli, when it says stimuli might include diagram, the 5th grade, for example, is one, diagrams of orbits of various objects around the sun, or stimuli might include a table with data about time and temperature data for a phase change graph. I would make sure that I included those kinds of stimuli in questions that I used, in activities that I designed with my students, possibly, and there's a lot of creativity. It doesn't just mean these are for questions that you create. You might give the students, have studied the content, give the students a stimulus and say, okay, generate questions. Let's come up with questions that might be asked around these data. Clustering questions together. You saw that in some cases you might have 2 questions on the same screen using the same data, and you might answer one question first and then use that answer to answer the next question. So you do a similar thing with designing some of your questions and activities, not each question being in isolation. And design an investigation that, we talked about that, Mary and I did, about the kinds of the pieces of investigation that they might be looking for, or, and it doesn't say make a claim, but make a claim and find evidence. Find evidence in this graph, or in this paragraph, or in this table that supports a claim that you make. Using multiple stimuli, not just here's one graph and here's questions about it, but here's a graph, here's a paragraph, here's a diagram, all 3 together. Use that, integrate information from one to the other. And in a lot of these ways, these are similar to the kinds of questions that students on the PARCC assessments will have. Multiple texts, and they're answering your question, a reading comprehension question about that. Additional resource, did you want to add anything on implications, Mary?
I would like to connect it to the CEEMS units that you're doing. And that is, when you're working on your CEEMS unit, I would use these test specifications to help kind of guide some of the activities that you're gonna be doing in the classroom, so that you're not having to, I mean, you want the CEEMS unit to complement what you're doing and not being a totally separate entity, and there's plenty of opportunity in this case.
And in one case, for example, if you have an idea for a CEEMS unit, and the topic seems to fit the content standards really well, and the engineering activity that they're going to be doing, yet when you go to the test specifications document, that content is squarely under the do not assess column. I would probably not want to invest 1 or 2 weeks of my time, say, focusing on content like that. I could if it were really important, but you might make some critical decisions about what kinds of experiences you have your students doing in your CEEMS unit based on what's in the assessed versus not assessed sections of the test specifications document. Then some additional resources. This tells you one way to get to the science and social studies page. Now I like Mary's a lot better, which is just search for test specifications, and it's right there. And then the online field portal. Notice that there were simulations that students had to manipulate in order to generate some data and answer questions on the test. Concord.org, any of you used Concord.org? Concord.org, how about PhET, the PhET simulations? Okay. Concord.org simulations are similar to the PhET simulations. There are lesson plans that go with them and questions that can be attached to some of those. So if you go to Concord.org and/or the PhET simulations, and then generate questions where the students are manipulating that simulation and then answering questions from that, that will give them experiences that will help them from the test as well. Practice test coming next this fall, and additional workshops. You have a wealth of resources in this area to, if you choose, if you're able to avail them of them. One is that as CEEMS people, we're on call. I mean, text us, email us, we're available. Steve Garrissey, who some of you know, is the science consultant for Hamilton County ESC, and he's working with the RET teachers. Is it RET or RIT? What is it? RET, the RET teachers this summer here, and he knows as well as we do about the details of the tests and the test specifications documents. So contact any of us. In particular, there are two sets of workshops that Meri and I are involved in. At Butler County, we've planned 2-day workshops that for each of the subject areas. So for example, high school, physical science teachers would come for 2 days to Butler County. They get kind of a Cliff Notes version of the test specifications, kind of like what we've done, and getting into it a little bit more. And then they'll be spending the bulk of the 2 days generating questions, finding, using some of those stimuli that we've already identified, or finding additional stimuli online, or creating them, and then working together to create questions that model the kinds of questions they might see in the assessment or the performance tasks using those stimuli. And we have noticed one before school starts for grades 5 and 8, and then ones that are greater subject specific. And did you have a question?
Is there a fee for these?
Yeah, these are all, I'm not sure what the fees are. We've got brochures on these. Meri has one that she's doing at Claremont County.
Right, and it's very similar. The only thing is we have them, all of the grade levels together. They will be separated out, but they'll be going on at the same day. Same thing, the version of the test specifications, and then taking it that next step further and looking at what are some of the tools and documents that you can use to add into your own instruction and also into your own assessments. And that's September 24th. And there is a fee outside of Claremont County. Within Claremont County, there's no fee, and it's $120, I believe. So.
Can you go back one slide, please?
Oh, this,
You
Oh,
have,
that's right.
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to. So physical science, September 25th and the 26th.
And I have some flyers on this, I'm sure Mary can give you more information about how to, contact, get registered for that if you're interested. And I know that in talking with Steve, Steve works directly with a number of Hamilton County school districts and some school districts outside of the county, and does a lot of this in groups, focusing, like working specifically with a group of teachers out of school. So in various ways, we're all trying to have the same goal, which is helping you feel comfortable as you're working with new standards, working with the test specifications, and helping the students get ready. We've talked mostly, and you've asked some questions. Are there any resources or ideas that you have about getting, now that we have the new content standards and the test specifications documents, to help you get ready or help your students get ready?
My district bought into explorelearning.com. You can do like a 30-day trial, but one of the really nice things about Explore Learning, they have these gizmos, which are these animated simulations. So when you say simulation, the kids are used to hearing the word gizmo. We take them to the computer lab, they get a little handout, but they do all the manipulation. It's all online simulation. So
Right.
that's something my district did to get ready.
Yeah, Gizmos is a really great connection to the expectations on the new assessments, but it does cost money. So the two that we showed you do not cost any money, but you're absolutely right. Gizmos is definitely
You
one of the
can
better
always check out the
resources.
free trial and
Yes,
talk to
you
your
can do a free
curriculum
trial
folks
for
about
30
it.
days, and you come up with another email to do free trial for another 30 days. Yes.
How much money is
Do you have a stand up?
So, does
Go ahead.
that mean that they're doing away with the OGT? Because last year,
Thank you.
we were told that we thought they were gonna do the OGT and the online, end of course exams.
You're right, we didn't talk about that. For your sophomores and above, it's still OGT. For your sophomores, the OGT is now completely aligned with the Ohio New Learning Standards. It's not a combination of old standards and new standards any longer. So for your sophomores, it is the OGT, absolutely.
For this year.
Yes,
So this year they'll be taking the OGT
Yes.
and in the course exams and, so they'll be taking 3 tests, 3 assessments?
depends on what they're taking that year, because the end of course exams are very specific, and if it happens to be they are a sophomore that's taking physical science, and they have to have the OGT, and they have to have their English language arts and their algebra, it just really depends on the individual.
So for example, at our school, 10th graders take physical science. So I can expect my students this year to take the OGT.
Yes,
And the performance-based assessments,
no.
just one or the other?
If your students take physical science, they're
5th grade year.
in their second year, they're sophomores, because it's the incoming freshmen that the physical science assessment's gonna take effect on.
Okay,
So it's not, your students will not be taking them.
okay.
But what if you teach biology as a 9th grade course? They're suggesting that you need to teach physical science in 9th grade?
No, there's
So-
there's no suggestion from the state on which comes first. That's a school district decision still.
So
They wouldn't. take
they won't
that.
have to take the test if they 10th graders and they take physical science.
That's
in the
correct.
10th grade.
They'll take it, yes. So those incoming freshmen, if they're taking biology this coming year, they're
They
not
don't have
going to
to.
have a physical science test until the following year, when they take physical science.
But they will have to take, so our students will be taking it in 10th grade, some students will be taking it in 9th grade because it's during their physical science year.
Right,
That's
it's,
correct.
yes. Any of the tests are during their school year, so it's an end of course exam. So if they're taking physical science in 9th grade, they're taking the end of course test in 9th grade.
Okay.
But if they're taking physical science in 10th grade, then it's end of course in 10th grade.
But not this year.
Right.
And for those students who are taking it physical science in the 8th grade, is it still a high school course? I mean,
It would be.
So they had to move it down to 8th grade, or would they not take it? I guess my question.
If there are students that are taking the physical science and are gonna get a credit for graduation, then it will be a high school physical science assessment end of course that they will have to take.
Because they're gonna work out a formula for how many points, you get a certain number of points for each test based on your score. It's not a pass-fail, it's how many points. You're gonna add up all your points for all the different tests, end of course tests. And if you reach a certain bar, then you graduate. There will be options for retaking some, and they haven't worked out all the particulars.
Right, they have, that's what they're doing right now.
Okay, so there's a total number of points they'll need to pass. So if they do really well on the performance base and not as well in the course exam.
No, because that's a combined
Oh,
score.
gotcha.
It's, if they did really well on English language arts and math and science, but really bombed out on social studies, they still may have enough points based on their scores and everything to still graduate without retaking that social studies.
Okay.
Unlike the OGT where you had to pass every subject.
Gotcha. So you get total combined score.
Correct.
In the, okay. So we have students who are failing in one course consistently. As long as-
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Patty, you had a question?
Yeah, regarding 8th grade content, have they taken astronomy out of that?
Yes, it has been moved, part of it has been moved to 7th grade, and then anything about stars or the universe was moved to physical science in the high school.
Okay.
So,
And so next year just like last year was a transition year, this coming year, because of the legislation, is a transition year.
for high school.
OGC is still the law of the land for graduation for the rising 10th graders. But they still are going to be taking the end of course exams, they just won't count for graduation. Your freshmen this coming year will not be taking the OGT, they will be taking the end of course exams.
And Dave and I will be here afterwards if you have additional questions, but I know that,
We have another
Another-
workshop to go to, so.
that's right, there's something else coming up.